Smooth as ever. Teenagers are becoming telepathic. Privacy is dead, and we're in another tech bubble. Welcome to 2030. Or at least one possible 2030. For the non-technical folks in the audience, it may be hard to grasp what's going on in the heads of 30s teenagers walking down the street, earbuds in, muttering to themselves, emotions flicking across their faces faster than seems reasonable. Heaven knows it's been fodder for every hacky late-night comedian and newspaper cartoons for the past couple of years. And anyone who joins an engine network right now with no prior experience will probably find it so overwhelming that they'll give up within a few minutes. And for someone over the age of around 30, it can take a few days of persistence before your brain is able to parse all the information that's being thrown at it. There's a reason that you hear testimonials about gaining a sixth sense, about slowly becoming telepathic. What we have today is a confluence of two factors. First and most important, engines. Lin and Xiaoming's 2014 paper on inference engines is now legendary in computer science. It's difficult to remember now just what a hassle it was to get information before Ganymede launched, and even the first few years afterwards. Like the early days of Google, querying Ganymede and the other engines was originally a difficult process. You forget now that you once had to type. Can we get the next slide, please? You once had to load the right data, give it the first hints. The idea of searching for patterns, for allowing Ganymede and the early engines to make the inferences that they needed to do their jobs, it wasn't intuitive, just like typing on a keyboard was something you once had to learn. But thank you. But it was still a light-speed leap forward. Before Ganymede, if you wanted to find a place, next please, if you need to find a place for people to eat tonight, then you need to go into one app, next slide please, in order to look for places, and then another app, next slide please, to see if it met your dietary requirements, and another app, next slide please. There we go, if you wanted to find a reservation, there we go, thank you Herb. It was basically impossible to do anything spontaneously. If you just wanted to wing it and try somewhere nearby, well, you'd probably be disappointed. Well, no one's disappointed anymore. Ganymede and the other engines' ability to parse petabytes of images, data, anything, and find patterns about anything, faces, words. It was a jump on the scale of the printing press. It was a jump on the scale of Google. In the mid-90s, nobody thought that a search engine could return results from the entire web at once and get along came Google. In the mid-10s, no one thought that a search engine could realistically answer questions like, where should we eat tonight? Not realistically. And yet, here we are. Ganymede allowed an orders of magnitude increase in how anyone could access information. Lin and Xiaoming had the perfect combination of philanthropy and acumen. After a while, they released Ganymede as open source and sparked what is now the wonderfully termed engine explosion. And that's the reason that throat mics, the subvocalization mics, can finally work. But Ganymede, they kept their data, their exabyte, their then incredible exabyte of structured information and inferences. They kept that private and exclusive to their company. But that on its own doesn't explain the muttering teenagers. The second factor, that's not a technology, that's a social change. One of the key points about engines is that the more information you give them, the more they know about you, the more effective they are. That's why those of us who remember the old web and privacy, we find the idea of giving third parties access to our lives, every word we speak, every person we talk to, abhorrent. I remember clearing my cookies every day. Ask your parents. Now, most of us suck it up and we deal with it because the results are worth it, but we still take our throat mics off when we leave the office and get home. Heck, I still use a keyboard to write code from time to time. Some of us have to, even as typing starts to become a niche skill, but the only way to stay connected to everyone in your social circle right now, regardless of which engine you use, is the only way is to be completely open. That is the only way that engines know which messages are yours to send to other people and vice versa. You remember the Facebook news feed, how it prioritized information that was more relevant to you? It's that. I mean, I'm offline right now because my engine knows I'm giving a talk, but as soon as I step off the stage, it will start catching me up on everything I've missed at 800 words a minute, faster than any person could possibly talk, but still clearly enough for my brain to parse and skipping the stuff I don't really need to hear. That's what those muttering teenagers are doing. They're taking part in a global conversation, interacting with thousands of people at a time, a constant worldwide, I don't know, news feed, 20th century chat room, 18th century coffee shop, either way. It's something much bigger than the sum of its parts. I mean, hell, I was on this stage telling worst-case scenario scare stories about flash mobs in the Thames, and we haven't even seen the start of it. That's the crucial part about engines. You have to opt in to get decent results. You give, they give back. And all those engines talk to each other. Okay, I'm anthropomorphizing. The companies that control the engines set up data sharing agreements between each other. My own personal engine, the little one, running on my phone, if it needs to, it can access the downlinks from the military drones, the privatized, outsourced drones that are circling 30,000 feet above the city. Maybe it needs to guide me past an obstruction, or maybe it needs to tell me where someone else is, or more likely it needs to magically route me towards a friend, or away from a group of people with ASBOs, or whatever ASBOs are called now. Maybe it just needs to answer my query about finding a pub where I can see the sunset. And the free trade-in on the other side of the river. Thanks. In exchange for me knowing that right now, other engines, like those from the government and the police, can always see where I am and what I'm up to. I know almost everything about them. They know almost everything about me. Those of us who couldn't get over that don't get to use engines. And that's not really an option. Imagine for a minute that you're sitting here back in 2014, just before Lin and Xiaoming released that paper. Nothing seems to have changed for a while. The last big revolution was Twitter, and that's history now. It was already 8 years old, for crying out loud. Back then, they were used to being surveilled in public, used to the fact that CCTV and phones meant there was a camera ready to catch things, although, only once those things had already started. There was just enough complacency, just enough thought of stability that they'd gone and got themselves into a bubble again. And you had big companies investing billions into social networks with no chance of ever making it back. That's where we are again, right now. One of the engines that those teenagers use, the one I use, was just sold for $20 billion. Those investors are banking that it'll last long enough to recover that money through promoted messages and slipping adverts into that 800-word-a-minute feed. They won't make it back, just like last time, just like the time before that. But my point is not to complain about people being people and making poor investment choices. My point isn't to mourn my old-fashioned ideas of privacy. Even back in 2014, that ship had sailed. Privacy was already dead. People just hadn't realized it yet. And my point isn't to be someone from the previous generation complaining about kids and their distracted muttering. Of course they're distracted. They're part of what might just be the greatest thing ever to happen to this planet. My point is, the dot-com crash didn't kill dot-coms. The app crash of 2015, that didn't kill apps. And the engine crash won't kill engines. You sit there and you think that the world will always be like this. Of course you do, I do. We've always had engines, just like we always had smartphones. But it might not have been engines. It might have been nanotech, it might have been biotech, or it might have been some weird thing that we can't possibly predict even now. Predictions of the future never turn out to be true. But whatever that next thing is, it is right around the corner, no matter what year you're in this hall. That next thing will change the world, and it will arrive so fast, faster than any of us think. It won't be shocking. It won't be startling. We humans will adapt to it, just like we always do, and life will get a little bit better, just like it always does. And whatever that next thing is, I really hope I'm there with all of you to see it. I'm Tom Scott. Have a lovely evening.